Thank you very much, Don. I think I nearly recognise myself. I'd just like to compliment both Brian and Bridget for setting a very high standard, which I hope I can emulate. But I'm looking forward to the discussion as well. 2 years here ago in Glenties, I spoke of the major challenges which we were facing in seeking to build an education system fit for the future. In that paper, I outlined a series of reforms which I was preparing to introduce during my time as Minister for Education and Skills. Many of those reforms are now underway. They are now underway. But in preparing for the MacGill Summer School this year, I wanted to take a different tack. Today, I want to explore what the Irish education system might look like for the participants in the system, the children, young people and adults served by the education system today, as well, of course, as the teachers, trainers and support staff who are employed in that system. Altogether, we're talking about 1.2 million people in this country. That's the scale of it, out of a population of 4.5 million. I want to look forward 20 years through 4 different lenses. I want to consider how Ireland will interact with a wider world in the 2030s, the impact of the curriculum on how the system performs, the key role of educators, and the infrastructure which needs to be put in place to support that system. The education system here in Ireland will have changed enormously over the next 20 years, driven, as we've heard already, driven partly by global changes, but most importantly by the needs of students themselves and those of our society. This poses major challenges for us today. How we connect the various elements of the system to ensure that it provides educational pathways for everybody. How we manage successful transitions from one part of the system to another, and how to support the inclusion of the marginalised groups, some of whom Bridget referred to in her contribution. I hope that my remarks will give an insight into what I believe the future will hold for our education system. I'll begin by touching upon the social and economic environment of the future. The children entering preschool this year will face, when they leave full-time education in 2030, is going to be very different. We can safely predict that at least 90% of those children will be leaving full-time education with further or higher education qualifications. The education system has to be flexible and adaptive enough to equip them with a range of skills and competencies. They will need them for the very different jobs market that they're going to face. But in equipping our young people for the future, we know that the acquisition of knowledge itself will no longer be a key skill. Instead, the vital skills will be the ability to find, to use and to reuse knowledge. I've been reflecting on what a useful process it was back in the 1990s of setting goals for this country. During the 1990s, we were discussing the need for investment in communications, the need to grow our indigenous enterprise sector, something which was discussed this afternoon, and the potential offered to Ireland by the development of the agribusiness sector. We were also concerned primarily with the problem of unemployment. In 1996, more than 60% of those out of work were classified as long-term unemployed, and overall unemployment remained at 13.5%. These areas, sadly, remain common threads in our current discourse. The target we outlined in the 1990s of halving unemployment by 2010 was comfortably achieved by the middle of the last decade. But those gains, as we all too painfully are now aware, have been steadily eroded over the last 5 years. The rapid return of unemployment to the same levels as in 1996 is a devastating blow to our nation. Shockingly, over 60% of those out of work in 2013 are now classified as long-term unemployed. Exactly the same percentage back in 1996. So, fellow citizens, we must be even more ambitious than we have sought to be in the past. We believe, all of us I think, in the benefits and dignity of work, not just for individuals, but for society as a whole. It is a deeply held Labour Party conviction. Eamon Gilmore has set a target of getting back to full employment by the end of this decade, and I fully agree with that. But in my view, we must go further. We must strive to return to full employment by 2020, and then work to hold those gains instead of throwing them away once more. The dignity of work must be a sustainable effort made to each of our citizens. There are many, many areas of our society that need to be reformed. No one single area is as important to the very texture and fabric of our society as ensuring that our people are able to find work and get paid a decent wage for it. My hope for the generation entering preschool today is that they will have learned the lessons of the last 10 years, that they appreciate that social damage caused by the politics of boom and bust, and that they know the only way to offer every member of the community a decent opportunity in life is to build an economy that is stable, prosperous, competitive, as George Lee was saying earlier, and also equal, as Finland is. A quality education and training system accessible to all is, in my view, an essential tool in realising that goal. So let's have a look at that education. It's a truism that the hallmarks of the modern world are uncertainty and complexity. Markets, technology, politics, culture and life itself are in a constant state of flux. As a society and as a culture, we must either adapt or be left behind. We must also provide the next generation with the skills and the resilience necessary to excel in a society that is continuously undergoing rapid transformation. Governments everywhere expect more from their education systems to prepare young people for a future of constant change, and so do we. The starting point for me are the following three. A sound curriculum, good teaching and school leadership are essential for educational success. I want to now outline some of the steps we are taking to embed these into our system. We must begin with preschooling, an area of education which was shamefully neglected by successive governments. That gap has been acknowledged and is being addressed in part with the free preschool year. Unfortunately, it remains the case that too often that year is viewed solely as childcare and not as early childhood education. We have an internationally recognised curriculum framework called ASHTIR, which seeks to put learning through play and exploration at the heart of learning for children under the age of 6. The future, in my view, could see 2 years of preschool combined with the 2 existing infant classes, junior and senior, becoming a coherent early childhood experience for all of our children. The seeds of literacy and numeracy should be sown in the home, nurtured in preschool, and cultivated in primary schools. Yet far too many of our citizens have emerged from the schooling system unable to read or write properly. Far too many. As many as 1 in 4 adults are in this space. Their lives are blighted, their horizons limited. And I make no apology for giving extra time for literacy and numeracy in our primary schools. Nor do I apologise for putting an end to the high-stakes state examination in the middle of secondary school, that hangover from a different era, the state-run junior certificate examination. And Bridget, as an aside, it has come to my attention from professional educationists that many of the young people aged 15 who depart from schools depart being pushed out of the school system because of the rigid nature of the junior cert curriculum in its present form. Increasingly, I'm hearing concerns about the future of various subjects, such as history, geography, physical education, languages, the arts, science, and so on. Each has an advocate who call for their subject to be made compulsory above and beyond every other subject. But all human knowledge cannot be distilled into a handful of compulsory subjects. So choices need to be made, or everything becomes compulsory because we fear the consequences of choice. The consequences of choice. My view is that wherever possible, choices need to be made by students and by schools. These choices should be supported by the state. Much as you know, and we had some of it I think earlier this week, much of this discourse is in the space dominated by the supporters of one particular subject, history. There are many historians, no doubt, here today and certainly here during the week. So let me put a challenge to you. Historians, in my view, owe a duty to the country to show why their domain of knowledge matters. As far as I'm concerned, it certainly does. They have a duty as to why 12-year-olds and their parents should take heed. It's my opinion that historians must advocate, argue and defend. But the target of their discourse should not be the state. Their conversation should be with the students who matter and the parents. They should seek to influence, not to coerce. They should rely on the lure, the wonderful lure of their subject, rather than compulsion. They should remember, in this country, that compulsion doesn't always work. Doesn't always work. And they should remember that even though history is not compulsory in half our schools, 9 out of 10 of our students today take history. 9 out of 10. Perhaps our students actually like it. I certainly did. Choices are already being made and history persists as a subject of choice for the vast majority of students. I am convinced that it will into the future. Just as the junior certificate has been abolished, I concur with what Brian McGrath has to say, the Leaving Cert must also be transformed. This reason for its transformation is in part caused by the proliferation of CAO courses, not, let it be added, designed to give students greater choice, but to create greater competition between courses, to the benefit of the colleges, not the students. This trend, unfortunately, continues. In the year 2000, there were 44 higher education institutions in the CAO system, offering 387 Level 8 honours degree courses. That's undergraduate BA courses. This had more than doubled to 877 choices last year in 43 colleges. In 12 years, we went from 387 courses to 877. For the coming year, that figure has risen further to 919 courses in 45 institutions. Of course, we want applicants to have choice, but some of the divisions between courses are questionable, to say the least. Let me try some of them out on you. 17 or 18-year-olds can readily distinguish between general arts and science courses, but can they really tell the difference between a course called Information Technology and one called Computing in Information Technology? If you type the word digital into the CAO course search engine, you will get 35 options. Type in media and you will get 140 options. Some of us might be hard-pressed to choose between a course in social media and web technologies and one in creative digital media. But at the moment, we expect Leaving Certificate students to be able to do so. I'm glad to say, and Brian has referred to it, the main stakeholders are already engaged in discussions about reducing the pressure of the points system and preventing too much specialisation in first year in higher education. Those discussions, in my view, must represent the start of a much more radical overhaul of the student experience in post-primary schools and beyond into further and higher education, and I concur with what Brian has previously said. Let me turn now to the role of the educators. If the curriculum must continue to adapt to better prepare our young people to participate in the social, economic and cultural spheres of our society, then the same is true of those delivering the curriculum. This is another area where considerable reforms are underway at present. The existing 19 teacher training centres across the country have moved now to become 6 centres of education, based on a report, in fact, led by Pazzi Salberg, to whom Brian McGrath referred earlier. These new centres, of which DCU is one, these new centres will have the size and the capacity to ensure that all of our teachers are trained to the very highest standards, and to ensure that we are constantly exploring and researching our education system, prodding it and poking it to find ways to improve it. We have lengthened by a year the amount of time it takes now to qualify as a school teacher, both at primary and post-primary levels. That additional time will focus on developing the pedagogical skills of our teachers. Our educators must be instilled with the capacity to facilitate learning at all levels of our system. From this year, it will be compulsory for all teachers to be registered with the Teaching Council. This will allow increasing professional standards to be set, but also regulated. Considerable reform is underway. So you might ask, why are we making these changes? As with the curriculum, we must be more ambitious in looking further into the future. We know that the quality of a teacher, as Bridget referred to in her closing remarks, that the quality of a teacher, more than any other factor, transforms and improves the educational outcomes for our children. But developing methods of communications are changing, and the relationship between educators and learners are consequently changing. The experiences of all our children, and particularly those with special needs, are being transformed by these changes. Just as mobile phones and computers have become ubiquitous over the last 20 years, the next 20 years will see further transformations. Even looking back 5 years, who would have predicted the rapid shift from desktop and laptop computers to mobile and tablet device dominations? With Google Glasses and Apple Watches currently being talked about, it is safe to assume that we have little idea what the technologies of the 2030s will look like. It seems equally safe to assume that these technologies will certainly be used by us regularly, if not even embedded within us. In such an exciting context, it frustrates me that we remain in patterns of the past, simply seeking to replicate in our classrooms what is already being disregarded in our workplaces. We must develop the abilities of our educators to adapt, to experiment, and to embrace all modes of communication to inspire and connect with young people. Schools and colleges must be more accountable to their communities rather than to the department. And a culture of self-reflection, continuing improvement, must be fostered in each classroom. If continuously improving the quality of our educators is our aim, then we must also explore how to make the profession increasingly attractive. In the past, a conservative system of promotions developed where teachers were appointed to posts of responsibility. Sometimes those posts of responsibility contained no additional responsibility. Most were simply filled by the longest-serving teachers in the schools. In 20 years' time, we need to have developed a system where teachers are promoted to management positions that involve genuine responsibilities. Their promotion should be based on the quality of their work and both their capacity and their ambition to become school leaders. I want now to finally turn to the issue of infrastructure itself. The future of further and higher education is undergoing a massive transformation. FOSS, I think it was Philip O'Doherty was talking earlier on about why is FOSS still there. Well, it's not. It will be gone within 4 to 6 weeks when the new Board of Solace is appointed. The legislation is through the House. And on the 1st of July this year, 33 VECs disappeared into 16 new institutions called Educational Training Boards. We are providing us, through these reforms, with an opportunity to completely rebuild the further education and training sector, reinventing apprenticeships that will give first-class opportunities to students, and ensuring that further education and training is a realistic, relevant offering that will provide people with opportunities to learn about their lives. The Irish university and technological sectors will also be transformed over the coming years. They have already begun to explore and embrace the reconfiguration of the third-level landscape, which I published earlier this year. And we are expecting reports and progress by the end of this calendar year as to how far they have got. And I can assure everybody in this room that I will drive that process as relentlessly as we drove the process to merge the VECs into their new configuration. The creation of college clusters will ensure the unnecessary duplication and inefficiencies can be driven out of the system. The prospect of technological universities will help reinforce the structural links between enterprise and the technological sector. And let me be very clear about this, because it was referenced in the earlier session this afternoon. We want the technological sector to get as close to industry as it is possible. And we don't want another Philip O'Doherty to be able to say that he wasn't going through near a university because it was going to take 12 months to a year, if not longer, to get the kind of response that he needs. If we are to grow the indigenous sector and grow the SME side of our economy, then the technological sector, which is what the RTCs were originally established to do, will have to get hand in glove closer to the needs of industry at local level. I want to conclude by saying that the changes that are happening in the Department of Education, the relationship between the Higher Education Authority and ourselves, and the transformation in the whole realm of third level is of a very ambitious kind. I'm very familiar with the graph that Bree McCrath put up on the screen. I'm very clear that there is a difficulty in relation to financial sustainability going into the future. But we are not going to start to look at the options or consider that until we're satisfied that we have actually achieved the kinds of economies that the landscape document and the rationalisation coming together of the IoT sectors can be achieved. We want to see, and I want to see it over the next 12 months, the kind of synergies that are capable of being achieved, the savings and the accumulation of savings that can be redeployed within the system before we're going to the next stage of the kind of funding for our third level system. We have, as two of the speakers have said, very high participation levels at third level, over 62% currently. I want to make sure that they're not just participating, but that they're getting the kind of skill sets and training and education that they themselves actually need. And I know that the technological sector and the university sector are very committed to achieving that, because at the end of the day, the new economy that will emerge in the 20s and 30s of this decade, based in this country, will have to be sustainable. It will have to be robust in the form that it will not sort of oscillate the way the last one did, that we don't lose the gains that we made in the 90s and early 2000s. And that will only be based on a highly skilled, highly literate, highly focused workforce population where learning is constant and lifelong, and where we adjust to the rapidly changing forces that are already on the global horizon and which, if anything, will intensify over the future. Thank you very much indeed.